Hi. Hello everyone. Good morning. Welcome to my channel. Happy Pride Month. We love Pride Month and I am sitting in the loudest chair I could have possibly sat in. Oh well, it's a beanbag. You might hear some rustling noises. But happy Pride Month. If you have been here before, welcome back. If you haven't been here before, my name is Cameron. I make lots of videos about books and stuff like that. So, as I have previously mentioned, because it is Pride Month, which we love Pride Month, I myself am queer, so I find any reason I can to celebrate Pride. Today I am going to give you some of my recommendations of queer books I've read in the last year by both queer authors featuring queer main characters, and just some personal favorites of mine, and give you like a very baby brief synopsis about them and what I thought about them, and maybe give you guys some recommendations if you're trying to read more queer literature for Pride Month, or just trying to read more queer literature overall. I'm also going to tell you some of the books that I currently am reading or have on my TBR lined up, so you get to hear a little bit about that. Those are the ones I won't really have a review on because obviously I have not finished them, but yeah. So, before we get started, comment down below your guys' favorite queer literature, your favorite queer book that you have read recently or that you are reading this month, or just if you're looking to read a certain queer book this month. Comment it down below, tell me what it is. Maybe we can both read it this month. I made a handy dandy little list. Let's get started. So, if you are looking for more classic, I'm not gonna explicitly say classic because some of them I think are closer to the cusp of like not necessarily old enough to be a classic yet, but I have a few kind of classics for you that I'm gonna tell you about first. So the first one is the only one that bends my rule about queer main characters. As far as the text explicitly states, they are not queer characters. But The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which, if you've never read it before, definitely pick it up. It is kind of, I'm sure you've heard about it before, but I'll give you a brief synopsis, but it's about a young, beautiful man who gets his portrait painted and then stops aging after that point. So, I feel like that's the most non-spoilery I can say. If you haven't read it before, you definitely should. But the reason I wanted to put this one on here is because it is a significant piece of literature. I'm not going to get too deep into the historical context of everything, but Kaz Rowe has a really, really great video about Oscar Wilde that I recommend you check out after you finish this video here, that kind of discusses about how when this book came out, he actually got put on trial because he was living in a time that was not super queer friendly, and the book was deemed queer enough that they were like, this man is suspicious. Kaz absolutely explains it a lot better than I can. Go watch their video about it. It's honestly so good. It is a hugely influential piece of queer literature, so check that out. Some other books, well, another book I have for you is The Color Purple, which I don't think is old enough to be considered a classic yet, but it is a Pulitzer Prize winner. The Color Purple is detailing the life of a young black woman as she's growing up and she's forced into this very abusive marriage, and how she falls in love with her best friend, and just like her kind of coming into her power as she gets older. If you haven't seen either of the movies based on the book or haven't read the book, please go pick up the book. It is so good. I read it for the first time this past February and I loved it. I loved every second of it. So definitely check that one out. Another one that I recommend, which is not necessarily a book, more of like theater, because Tennessee Williams wrote theater, but it's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I read this earlier this year too, because I was interested in the history of like how it was made into a movie and then pretty deeply censored because of it. I thought it was really interesting. It's about a man whose lover dies, and so he's coping with it through a lot of use of alcohol, and his wife is trying to maintain a passing straight relationship. And all of the characters are a little crazy. They don't handle things the way that healthy people normally handle things, but plays are normally very quick reads because so much of the stuff is not left in the script. So many of the actions they choose to take or how they say the lines. So it's a very quick read. Tennessee Williams also just wrote a lot of plays, and he was an out gay man in not early Hollywood, but like the golden age of Hollywood where there was lots of censorship. So I think his works are very interesting, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was just the first one I read. So that's going to be my recommendation for you today. One I have currently got lined up on my reading list is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I was looking into this, and James Baldwin was a queer man, and I obviously haven't started reading it yet, so I don't want to give you like a big synopsis of what's going on in this book, but I am looking forward to reading it. I somehow missed reading James Baldwin when I was trying to read all Black authors in Black History Month back in February, so I'm excited to read my first book of his. So those are kind of my classics that I got for you. A lot of the books I read just for my own genre preferences, and just of the ones I've read, a majority of the queer fiction that I really enjoyed was fantasy. Now, I do have a few romances for you, but I actually would say most of the list I have is not romance-based. If you want some non-romance queer lit for this month, then I'm your gal. But let's talk about some of my favorite queer authors. They kind of go throughout genres. They kind of blend and do a bunch of different things. But I found 3 in the past year that I have really, really enjoyed, and so I'm going to give you one recommendation from each of them, although I would recommend all of their books. So, the first one is going to be Alice Oseman. Y'all knew it was coming. I figured I'd put them first. She writes a lot of romance stuff. She writes the Heartstopper series and also the book Solitaire. But the one I'm going to recommend to you guys from them today is Loveless, which is an excellent probably one of my favorite queer books of all time, but also just a really excellent depiction of aromantic asexual people. Did I cry like a baby when I read this book? I did, because I am also asexual, so it was really nice to get like a really honest depiction of what it means to be asexual. So the one I recommend to you guys from Alice Oseman is definitely Loveless, but if you just want like a cute little graphic novel to read, the Heartstopper series is great. All of her novels are just excellent. And apparently, I've not seen it, but the TV show Heartstopper is very good. So definitely check that out. Another queer author that I've really enjoyed discovering and reading, I read all 3 of their books that they've got published, and they've got a new one coming out soon, is Casey McQuiston. So Casey McQuiston wrote I Kissed Shara Wheeler, One Last Stop. I forgot about that for a second. They also wrote One Last Stop, and most famously, I would say, because it just got turned into a movie, they also wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue. So in attempts to have like a bit of an array of characters on this, I will say the first one I read was One Last Stop, but I would probably say it's the worst of the 3, but it's because all 3 of them are so excellent. But One Last Stop is about a girl who lives in New York, and she takes the subway, and one day she starts seeing this little hottie woman on the train, and kind of starts getting to know her, and they find out that there's kind of something weird going on with the train girl. And that's all I'm gonna say, because I'm trying not to spoil it. But all of their books are kind of like fun little concepts, and they have spoken a lot about how they write books for like stories that they wanted to see. So they sometimes take outlandish concepts and kind of run with them. So they primarily write romance, and I want to say they are the only solely romance author on this list. And then the other author that I found recently that I've really enjoyed is TJ Klune. He's written several books. Every one that I've picked up has been excellent, but the one I am definitely going to recommend to you today is Under the Whispering Door. His partner, like the author, TJ Klune's partner died very suddenly and very young, so he wrote this book to kind of explore his grief, but it's about a man who dies, and it's his time period between when he dies and kind of like this purgatory afterlife kind of situation, and when he decides to cross through the Whispering Door, which basically means when he's ready to cross over. But yeah, the area where he's staying in that time period is a little tea shop. It's very cozy. The main character is homoromantic and asexual, which Klune has very clearly expressed, like, all of his characters will be written that way because he himself is homoromantic asexual, and he wanted to introduce more representation of that. And I love that book. I think it is so good. But he also has several other series and several other standalones, so definitely check out any and all of his works. The other one I really like is In the Lives of Puppets, which is a Pinocchio retelling. Now we're getting on to more of my fantasy books, but we have Spellbound by F.T. Lukens. It is about two wizard apprentices, and they're like, what do you call their, whatever you call an apprentice? I don't think it's master. No, but the person they're apprenticing under, those two wizards do not like each other. One of the main characters is queer and the other is non-binary. So, and it's just a very fun, it's been a while since I've read this, so I'm sorry if I'm not recapping it very well, but it's a lot of exploration of magic and like learning to grow into your magical power, because one of the main characters actually has no magical power. He uses technology to study magic. So it's very interesting. It's very fun. So I think you guys should check that out for sure. Then we have Cemetery Boys. I am sure you guys have seen this. I feel like it's been all over Book Talk and a bunch of other things. I'm sure you guys have seen the cover before. But it is about a trans boy who is trying to, and forgive me if I misstate this, but in Mexican culture there is a certain group of men that are allowed to perform rituals to speak to the dead and like help them pass on and stuff like that. And because he has just transitioned, they are refusing to let him become one of these men. So it's a lot about his struggle to get them to kind of take him seriously. And on the way, as he's like studying this, he encounters a guy who is recently deceased and doesn't know what happened to him. So together they go and try and solve what happened to him, and then so that the main guy can be taken seriously by his family. It's very good also. I think Aiden Thomas, the author of it, is also trans, so he draws a lot on his experience, and I really liked reading this, actually. I truly am trying to give you as the least amount of spoilers as possible because I really recommend it, and I do think you guys should check it out. Ooh, here's a very fun one. So this is kind of, it's like a sci-fi fantasy. A lot of tropes you find in both are present in this, and I'm not gonna give away anything, but it is about a young woman. She's also trans, so if you want more trans literature. Rika Aoki, the author of this book, is a trans woman, and she draws a lot on her experience as a creative woman. Specifically, the main character is a violin player, so she is pursuing tutelage under a very, very famous violin player. So it's kind of their story, and then there's several side stories. Like there's a story about the family who runs the donut shop that they go to before rehearsal, and a bunch of stuff like that. It is so crazy. That's kind of the best word I have for it. It is crazy what goes on in this book. Every time I thought like something new wasn't gonna pop up, it did, and it like pleasantly surprised me. The book is like all over the place in the very, very best way. If you are a sci-fi fan, you should definitely check this book out. I actually should really reread it. I don't own a physical copy yet but I should also reread it because I had so much fun reading it. For a graphic novel recommendation, perhaps one of the more famous recent graphic novels, queer graphic novels, is Nimona, which just recently got turned into a movie that I think was Oscar nominated. The graphic novel is a very, very fast read. If you're not, I don't know why you would be on this channel if you're not a huge reader, maybe if you just like listening to me yap, but if you are not like a huge graphic novel reader, the movie is actually a very, very good adaptation of the graphic novel. So check both of them out because they're so good. And N.D. Stevenson, the author, very much used Nimona as a character to explore his gender, because Nimona is, I don't think they explicitly say that she is, but very strongly implied to be genderqueer. But it's a very fast read, it's very fun. That's all I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna stop right there because I'm not giving you any spoilers. For more historical fiction, I would recommend Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, which is about a young Scottish boy who is not treated well because of his queerness. And if you're looking for like a happy queer novel, this is not the novel I would recommend for you. I think it is beautifully written. I think it does a great job exploring family dynamics and like moving on from assault and stuff like that. But it is so good. And Mungo is such a good character. Like he feels like he could jump right out of the page because he's so descriptive in his writing about Mungo. So definitely check that out if you're looking for more angsty queer literature. And Douglas Stewart has also written, I want to say, several other books and definitely several other essays about being queer in Scotland during, I want to say the book takes place in the 80s. If you're looking to read a fantasy brick, a queer Lord of the Rings with more diversity, I think you guys should definitely check out The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. She is self-described as sapphic, and one of the main plot lines of this story is sapphic. And there's so much that goes on. There's multiple points of view. So there is a spy who is working as a handmaiden to a queen, and there is a monk of the Priory of the Orange Tree, as the book is named after, and several other characters that we follow for this major fantasy epic. It is so long, the book itself, but it is not part of a series. You're not committing like the next several weeks to read 15 books, you know what I mean? It's just a very incredibly well built. This book was an easy 5-star for me because the world building was so incredible. Definitely check out The Priory of the Orange Tree if you're a big like high fantasy fan and you're also looking for your fantasy to have a little less basis in such Eurocentric environment. So we have one of the most banned books currently in the United States, which is Genderqueer by Mayo Kababe. And Kababe describes your experience coming to terms with not being a cisgender person. And it's a graphic novel. They have excellent art. Their work is so good. Super easy read, super fast read. It really gives a great perspective on what it means to be trans. So if you, like me, are also a cisgender person and want a little bit more perspective on the trans experience, and maybe you don't have a trans person you can just go and talk to, this is a really, really great resource. And you know me, if you've been on this channel before, you know I'm a huge fan of supporting banned books, and this is one of the more widely banned books in the United States today. So if you just want to be a little rebel along with reading more queer literature, Genderqueer is a great way to do that. A book that I read recently that just came out is Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, another fantasy work. If you're not big on fantasy, I'm sorry. If there are genres that you personally are a huge fan of, that you want more people to read, put them down in the comments below. But Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher is, well, it's about a princess, Gwendolyn, not Guinevere. They are just characters named after the Arthurian legends. Gets betrothed to Arthur, And they are both very queer. They're queer disasters. And it's about them kind of trying to navigate, should we go through this lavender marriage while they're also falling in love with other people? And then there's a lot of like political intrigue, because obviously like when you're the princess and your father is the king, there's a lot of political intrigue. But yeah, I had so much fun reading it. There were definitely some laugh out loud parts. I think both of the characters, Gwen and Art, were very dynamic, along with several of the side characters, and I had so much fun reading it. I really liked it. And it's a standalone in the same way that Priory is. So you can just sit down, I think it's only like 300 pages, so you can just sit down in like a day and read it if you wanted to. And then the final recommendation that I have for you, that it blends really nicely into the books that I'm reading, is the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. There is a government controlled, not really controlled, government mandated coven in the United Kingdom, and it's about several witches in that coven, whether they have broken out of it or they are leading it or they're just involved, but it's about several other witches. There are several queer characters, particularly one of the big plot lines is a young trans woman like tries to enter the coven and they won't allow her because she was not assigned female at birth. So it's a lot of discussing that. There's a lot of political intrigue. There is lots of witch magic, stuff like that. And it is a really good time. I particularly am reading the audiobooks, which are narrated by Nicola Coughlan, who is an excellent audiobook reader. But yeah, I read the first book of that a few years ago, and now, not a few, like last year. I read the first book of that like last year, and now I am currently reading the second one of the series, which is The Shadow Cabinet. So that's what I am currently reading. I'm really enjoying it so far. I have not finished it yet. Oops. And then I am also reading another Pulitzer Prize winner, called Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which is just about a man whose partner, like he separated with his partner and now his former partner is getting married. So it's just about him kind of going through that, and he's doing a lot of traveling and trying to like run away from his problems, essentially. I am only about a third of the way through, I think, but I am having actually a really good time reading it. It's very sad. It's very like melancholy in tone. You're gonna hear about it on my monthly recap, probably on the first weekend of July. And then the other one I've got lined up right now is The Queer Girl Is Going to Be Okay by Dale Walls. Honestly, I really liked this cover. I truly don't know anything about it. I think it's like a teen coming-of-age novel, but I'm excited to read that. I think I'm going to give myself a little brain break between all of the sad gay literature I'm reading right now. That is what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. I've already given you several reasons to comment down below, but if you have a recommendation for me to put on my list to read this month, I particularly am seeking out queer literature without queer authors. So if you have any recommendations for like that, or if you just have a queer book that you really, really like, put it down in the comments below so I can look for it through my library. If you've been here before and you find yourself that you keep coming back, hit me with a little subscribe. It won't hurt. It's free. It helps me. If you already are subscribed and you don't have your notifications on, that also helps me, so I can know you guys are watching all my stuff. What else do I have for you? I think that's it. So, happy Pride, everyone. Go celebrate queer people. Go support queer-owned businesses. And go support your local library. I will talk to you all later. Goodbye!